Joining us now is Sergeant Betsy Smith. She has been a law enforcement trainer for over 20 years, with positions in patrol, investigation, narcotics, hostage negotiation, crime prevention, and more. She's also spokesperson for the National Police Association. Sergeant, it's a pleasure speaking with you.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
Well, California state lawmakers have introduced Assembly Bill 742, which aims to ban the use of canine units in arrests, apprehension, and crowd control. If passed, how would this bill impact law enforcement's ability when responding to those situations?
Well, as you know, American law enforcement right now is in a retention crisis. We cannot get police officers to stay on the job. Many are retiring early or just leaving the profession altogether. And we can't get new people to take those positions. So a good multi-purpose patrol canine is absolutely invaluable to the agency, especially to some of these smaller, more rural agencies who really depend on that patrol canine to be the backup for that handler when backup might be hours away.
The bill's author, California Assemblyman Corey Jackson, claims that the use of canines are part of Americans' quote, cruel and violent history, specifically against minority groups. What's your perspective on this?
In Section 1 of this bill, they talk about that the use of a police canine is a mainstay of constant dehumanizing and cruel abuse of Black Americans. That's ridiculous. First of all, let me just say that dogs are colorblind. They don't see people's colors. And so what these legislators are really doing is attacking the American law enforcement officer. So police canines are not used to dehumanize anyone. And I would love everyone in California especially to go read Section 1 of this bill because it's poorly worded and it's primarily emotional, bringing up things like the civil rights movement, George Floyd, who had nothing to do with a canine unit, and all kinds of other things. It's very emotional with zero substance.
I also read the bill cover to cover. Other than the section you said, it does also say, according to Department of Justice, use of force data from 2016 and to 2019, Black people are 3.5 times more likely than any other group to be subjected to use of force due to police canine use, with Hispanic people being the second most likely compared to cases involving white people at 6 per 1 million people. Is there any weight to this argument?
Well, and they didn't really provide much detail on that. But here's the problem that nobody likes to talk about. African Americans in America are disproportionately more likely to find themselves in a violent confrontation with police because they comprise more than half of the arrests in this country for murder or manslaughter. So that's likely why they end up on the wrong side of a canine unit. When a police canine unit is used, and I ran my agency's canine unit for many years, when a police canine unit is used, they are used because someone is resisting arrest or they're fleeing a police officer after a violent encounter or a violent crime, like an armed robbery. So when somebody gets bit by a police dog, it's because they're not complying with lawful orders. So the way to not get bit by a police dog is to comply with lawful orders and not resist arrest. It's really that simple.
And Sergeant Smith, now you have worked with canine dogs before. Can you tell us how canine dogs get trained and become part of law enforcement?
Right. So we have been using police canines in the United States since the 1970s. Now, Europe has been using them since the 1800s. And many of these, what we call multi-purpose patrol dogs, and they're usually Malinois and German Shepherds. Once in a while, you'll see a Rottweiler. They are used for various things. They are used to smell drugs. They are used to track children or elderly people if they become lost. They're also used to track offenders, like an armed robber who flees an area or an armed subject. They are used to protect the handler when the handler is attacked on a traffic stop or some other kind of altercation. They also can be used for community policing purposes. That's one of the things we used our dogs for, was to go to a Cub Scout group or to a nursing home so that people could have a positive interaction with a canine and that canine's handler. And also other police officers love having interaction with that police contact. Who doesn't like dogs?
But to be fair, the bill is not calling for completely getting rid of canine units. It simply says that police can't deploy them in situations like arrests or crowd control. Obviously, canine dogs are very helpful in search and rescue, sniff out drugs and narcotics. Is this proposal reasonable to only use dogs when they don't bite people?
A couple of things there. First of all, a patrol canine, you want to try and get as much bang for your buck, if you will, when you have that canine. So just to have a canine that will track is not going to be of a lot of use to your average law enforcement agency. Remember, most police agencies out there have less than 10 officers. And again, because our law enforcement agencies are so short-staffed, a police canine is very often going to be invaluable to a handler, especially in a rural area or on a busy night shift in an urban area where backup is not available. And we also need to, let me just tell you, 2 days ago, the Jefferson County, Colorado Sheriff's Department had a canine Graffet, was murdered in the line of duty. That's a horribly sad situation. I ask anyone to go to their Instagram and look at the procession for canine Graffet. But here's the thing. We're talking about a murdered police dog instead of a murdered police officer. And that's what police canines do every year in this country. They sacrifice their lives, they're a dog, for the life of a human being. And if we take those dogs away from police officers in California, you're going to have more dead and injured police officers, and no one wants that.
Well, thank you so much, Sergeant Betsy Smith. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.